So while most personal trainers last a mere 2 years in the field, Aleks Salkin has been going strong since 2010 and is certified in the most challenging and prestigious certification, StrongFirst. Additionally, he stands out of the crowd with his communication skills. While some trainers may be knowledgeable with how to do the thing, Aleks can also explain the thing, and in many languages. He is fluent in English, Italian, and Hebrew. And today he's going to share how to get ripped without a gym and the importance of old school strength. So make sure you stay tuned to the end when he shares some functional strength assessments you can try out on yourself to see how you measure up. My former Krav Maga buddy, fellow Nebraskan, kettlebell enthusiast, the Hebrew hammer, Aleks Salkin. Woohoo!
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we were just talking about our Krav days and how that's how we met was we were doing a sparring exercise or something like that. So
yeah,
and you were
I remember those classes together because I remember in particular, as we were talking about before, there were a number of people in the class who could hit hard, but at the risk of, I don't want to sound like misogynist. It's not meant to be misogynist, but out of all the ladies, you hit the most like a man. And I thought that was amazing because it's like women who, I think women need self-defense probably more than the average guy because, there are obvious reasons. And you got to be able to hit in a way that is going to get the guy's attention and hopefully get him to leave you alone. I remember holding the head you was always like, I had to brace myself because you could really just let him rip. I mean, like your punches were tough. I assume they've only gotten harder with age. But I remember that really stuck out even to this day. I was just reminiscing about that the other day. Like, yeah, she could probably take someone's head off, I'll bet.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I'll never have to do that, but I really liked Krav. I miss it. That was, it was a pretty cool time. So since then Krav was part of your journey of where you are now with your online business. But tell me about the kettlebells. Like, why kettlebells?
That's a really great question. So I grew up kind of scrawny and weak and goofy and non-athletic when I was a kid. And I never played any sports. I never did all that much physical activity. I mean, I did gymnastics when I between the ages of maybe like 4 and 8. I used to play outside a lot. So it's like I got physical activity, but I was always kind of a little awkward in terms of like, I just didn't know how to like exert myself physically. And a lot of the things that other people did really didn't appeal to me. And, we were growing up in like the 90s. It was at a time where it was like most of the physical activity that people did was still pretty traditional. Like we didn't really have access to the internet to teach us about all sorts of, crazy stuff from around the world. Like Krav Maga, for example, that was still pretty localized in Israel for the most part. I always felt like, man, this is just the way I am. I'm just kind of like a goofy, like awkward kind of guy. And then in 2006, and actually to give you an example of that, I remember in gym class, it was my junior year. I'll never forget this. It was weight training. We had to like do weight training, I think maybe once or twice a week or something like that. And I was paired, my spotting partner was really mismatched because this guy was like a stud. I mean, I think he was in the football team. He just looked super athletic, right? And I got buried under the bench press at one point by what couldn't have been more than like the weight of like a broomstick with a few bagels on it. And, but the problem was that my spotter was turned around talking to his friends. Like, he just assumed like nobody would be this weak that they can't put this weight up. And so I had to roll the barbell down my stomach and then put it on the floor. And, I wasn't angry. It was just like, I just got to make sure I don't, die. And the gym teacher, Mr. Chavez, was like, Aaron, like screamed across the weight room. Like everybody stopped. Like all weights were, like nobody moved. And he's like, you're supposed to be watching it. What are you doing? And Aaron was like really sparring, not sparring partner, my spotter was like really embarrassed. Like his face was really red. He wasn't mad at me, but he was like embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I felt like ashamed. It was like, I can't believe I couldn't put this weight up. Everybody was looking at me equally because Aaron had to pick the weight up and, people see it wasn't very much. I have no idea what it was, but again, it was not a lot. So I had some I had some not great experiences when I was younger because it was like a lot of this stuff didn't really speak to me. I didn't know, to kind of sound like an actor, what my motivation was. So like, why should I do this? What's this going to help with? Like, how is the technique supposed to be? It was just not a lot of instruction was given. And then in 2006, I was introduced to Muay Thai, and a friend of mine and I started taking Muay Thai classes at Mick Doyle's Martial Arts Center in Omaha. And Mick was like a great teacher. The height of professionalism. He had a really great staff. And I learned a lot. And I started to feel like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be like, when you physically exert yourself. And I started doing some kind of like bodybuilding routines. My friend Trevor, who went with me, was getting into bodybuilding at the time. And so I did what, any good young lad would do. And did maybe 6 different bicep exercises and like 12 chest exercises. Because, got to look good, right?
Yeah, and no legs,
and
of course.
Nothing for the legs.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, nothing for the legs, obviously, because I didn't want them to be tired before I had to do a bunch of kicks, so I justified skipping legs by doing that. And then in my university Spanish classes, I would always get there it was after lunch, and I would always get there like maybe 15 minutes early. And I had a friend, Drew Christensen, who was always talking about this guy named Pavel, who was a former Soviet Special Forces physical training instructor who was like, one bad, tough dude. And how he was always talking about these things called kettlebells, which I had heard of before because there's an oblique reference to them in a book about Bruce Lee's training that I had purchased during my Muay Thai years. And I thought, okay, this sounds interesting, whatever. I didn't really have that much of an interest. But then one day, but he would talk about it. It was like every time he would, show like pictures. Because back then, you didn't have like the phone with a video.
Right.
So he would like bring pictures of some of the stuff. And it looked really weird. It was like, and to me, it looked weird because it was not like biceps and chest oriented. It wasn't like what we typically see as being like weightlifting. It was really much more old school. It was the way that people used to train back when men were men and, whatever. So
they had mustaches with handlebars with their
exactly,
weights.
Yes. And they either saved women on the railroad tracks or put them there, that was.
Yeah. They had the woman like in the bicep.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Slung over the shoulder, saving the day, that sort of a thing. And they had the leopard print leotard.
Always.
Almost forgot about that.
With suspenders.
Yes, always. And so one day, this was probably like late March to early April 2008. He called me up and he was like, hey, do you want to try a kettlebell workout? Prior to that, I had zero interest in kettlebells. And I to this day, I don't know why, but I said, yeah, sure. So I went over to his house and he showed me some of these things. And for the first time ever, it felt like there was like that missing piece that I always lacked. Because I always wanted to get strong. I wanted to be able to physically express myself, but there was always something missing. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And the first time I swung a kettlebell, which I'm positive it was all dead wrong, but still something about the movement itself seemed like it made more sense. And it seemed like it was like what we're supposed to do. So the movements that we did some swings, Turkish get-ups, I think some pressing, things like that. I was like hooked immediately. And I remember he did like the best thing like any friend could do. Not only did he loan me 2 books by Pavel, like the guy who's responsible for bringing kettlebells from beyond the Iron Curtain, the former Soviet Union. He loaned me Enter the Kettlebell, which is his like seminal work on kettlebell training, and The Naked Warrior, which is about body weight training, like old school, like the hard stuff, not stuff to burn you out, like 1-arm push-ups and 1-leg squats are like the primary focus of this book. And more than that, how to create the tension in your body necessary to be able to do these movements and then apply that to other things. Mm-hmm. And he loaned me a kettlebell, a 25-pound kettlebell.
That's a heavy kettlebell.
Actually, as it turns out, it's not. Well, for ladies, actually, it's recommended that you start with 25 pounds because the movements that you do engage a lot of muscle. And so it's not like a bicep. You're not like doing bicep curls with them or tricep extensions. For that, it would be a little heavy. But you're particularly, if you're starting with kettlebells, you're learning how to do movements such as picking the weight up off the ground, which recruits a lot of muscle, like all of your leg muscles, your glute muscles, your back, your core. So you have a lot of muscle working toward you. So you learn how to make the 25 pounds not feel as heavy because you learn how to get all your muscles moving together and working together so that you're not doing just one muscle at a time or what have you, but you're actually doing full body workouts. So 25 pounds sounds like a lot, but for ladies, that's the recommended weight. For gentlemen, it's 35 pounds.
Okay.
And this is a generic thing. Like you can do more or less depending on your experience level.
Right.
But so this is like just a general, like, for an average lady or an average gentleman, 25 to 35 pounds is a good starting weight. But that's how it was born.
You've talked about something you mentioned a couple days ago was why one of the myths that people say in exercise is, well, I'm, just get moving and I'm moving a little bit and it counts with air quotes. So tell me why that's not true. Because I feel like I hear a lot of people say that.
Well, I would say on the one hand, it is true. On the other hand, it isn't. So it is true that it's better, like something is always better than nothing when it comes to movement. But a lot of people, unfortunately, stop there. So they like, for example, if you're like, today I didn't get in my workout, but I was able to walk 20 minutes at lunch. So I did something. That's true. But it's not good as a long-term strategy. Like just doing something, like you'll end up getting to the point where, age, and everything that comes with it, you have to outwork it. And that doesn't mean that you have to do like insane workouts. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of your training should not be insane. As Dan John, is a very famous coach, likes to say, little and often over the long haul. And provided that, now the little is going to change as you get stronger. So for example, the little that I did, 11 years ago when I started is different from the little that I would do now.
Yeah.
But relative to what I'm capable of, right? Like it's better to do a little of what I'm now capable of rather than maintain the little that I had to start with in order to get some results. So a lot of people use that better than nothing as a long-term strategy as opposed to a short-term kickstart. As a short-term kickstart, it works awesome, but it'll work awesome for maybe 6 weeks or so. And then eventually something is going to have to change.
Yeah, that's so true. There's really, I always say when I'm coaching other Mary Kay consultants and really this applies to all parts of life, there's really no substitute for consistency. So I can see where it's partially true, partially not true. So for the person that wants to get beyond just the moving, who they really want to build muscle, and maybe they relate to your story of being what you call the skinny kid and they want to get strong, or maybe they're on the other spectrum and they struggle with their weight, but they really want to get ripped. They don't want to gym. Where does someone even start? Because it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, first things first, I would not rely on a gym. There are a lot of good things about gyms. I would say, in my correct opinion, the best part about gyms is if I would say maybe more studios, because it really depends. Like a lot of the big box gyms, this may not be the case, but community is really, really important in your long-term success, because if you're going it alone, you won't go very far. Like I prefer to train alone. I rarely train with people. I like training with people, but I don't rely on it. So when I'm around people and we're training, it's fun, but I don't rely on it. But a lot of people do. And for a lot of people, that's a necessity. So if you do want to go to a gym and carve that time out of your day, it's got to be with a community that has the same goals in mind that you have in mind, wants to support you and wants to see you succeed. There are plenty of people who will be more than happy to see you fail. It's like they say, misery loves company.
Yeah.
Every bit is true for your training. So that is a really important part. But the other thing is that I wouldn't start by saying, well, if I don't have a gym or a community, I just can't get started. The reality is that there's a guy who is a really crazy dude, but he's very smart when it comes to strength and conditioning. And he has said, strength training is something it's really easy to do. And he talks about, he did a stint in jail for a DUI, and he didn't have access to weights for most of the time he was there.
I think, was that he on your podcast?
I believe I mentioned it on the podcast.
Yeah, I think I remember
Well, he
this.
was not. No, this was different. That was a different guy.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people in jail.
Why do you know so many people that were in jail, Alex?
I'm an eclectic individual. Actually, the guy who was on my podcast who has been to jail, it wasn't this guy. It was somebody different who I've never met or really interacted with, but I read his blog and his articles. But he did a lot of like really low intensity and high rep calisthenics work, and he was able to maintain his strength. And so the takeaway that he gives is that it's really pretty easy to get strong, or pretty simple, we'll say. But the main thing that most people need to know is that a lot of people start in the wrong place. They start where they should end up. Really, the most important thing is that you move.
Wait,
right?
What do you mean by start where they end up? What does that mean?
Well, a lot of people want to start where they should end up. So, for example, they might say something like, well, I'm going to get a gym membership. I'm going to go 6 days a week. I'm going to go for an hour at a time. I'm going to buy all these supplements. And it's like, there will be a time when that will be an effective strategy for you. But if you're going from 0 to 1 is enough to get a result. So you want to make it easy enough on yourself where what you're doing doesn't feel like it's such an emotional investment. So, for example, believe it or not, I believe it's 4 days a week of walking for just 17 minutes at a time will put you, technically speaking, at the level of moderately physically active. Now, in my opinion, that's pretty abysmal, but it's also very easy to do. If you're currently doing 0, that's a tremendous difference.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would tell people to do is start where they are. So, it requires a shift in perspective, because again, many people's perspective is that they have to have a gym.
Yeah.
They have to have, perfect eating habits. They got to change everything all at once. You'd be amazed at the changes that you would see if you're going from not routinely physically active to just walking for 20 minutes a day. Like you'll sleep better, almost guaranteed you'll sleep better. You will lose weight. You will start to feel like you can move better. You're going to feel like you're less stuck in your own body. So if we're trying, and maybe the listeners hearing this are going to think, that doesn't really sound like, that can't be that many people. When I lived in Israel, I lived there for 4.5 years. And the majority of the people that I worked with were largely sedentary, and they either had been physically active in the past or had never been physically active, but currently were not physically active. And they came to me from their physical therapist. So people would send people to me because I have some expertise in helping people to move at the foundational level so that they can safely build up to getting stronger with less likelihood of hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And it was little things like this, just little. I had a deal with the ladies. This is in 2015. I had a ladies class that I did 2 times a week, but I was traveling a lot. Like I traveled abroad from Israel about 8 times in 2015. And so they complained, like, you're never here. We really need you. And I was like, well, I need to disabuse them of this, because if it's one thing, I'm only seeing them twice a week, which, in my opinion it's a good start. But again, it's long-term. It's not the best way to be. So we set up a group on WhatsApp, and I said, everybody has to do 5 minutes of some kind of movement. I don't care what it could be, laying on the ground, just practicing your breathing. It could be going for a walk. It could be whatever. But all you have to do is just check in. Let me know you've done your 5 minutes. If you want to do more, you can, but you are only committed to doing 5 minutes. That's it. Within 2 or 3 weeks, almost all of them were doing 10, 15, 20 minutes. Periodically, they would backslide to, I had a really crazy day, but I got in my 5 minutes. There was one gal who'd been in a really nasty car accident and had to see a chiropractor like on a weekly basis at one point. And during the course of not just the 5 minutes thing, but also the time I'd worked with her prior to that, she didn't have to see her chiropractor for like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And her chiropractor called her. Yeah. And was like, are you okay? Like, I haven't seen you in 3 months. So it's amazing. Really, again, it's little and often over the long haul.
Yeah.
And we weren't meeting in a gym either. We were meeting in the house of one of the participants.
Well, that's what I think is so neat about the way that your business is structured is I love your emails. They're so well written. They're entertaining, which I so appreciate. But they're so knowledgeable. But then you also, from that one-on-one perspective, you've got totally me hooked. But then you've also created this community online, and you've got the videos. So you can read it, you can watch it, and you've got your 8-week program. So people can hire you as this virtual coach. And because you're good at communication, I think that it is totally your niche. So I know you wanted to share some functional strength assessments with our listeners just to kind of give them a little challenge. And sometimes you don't know what you're great at sitting at a desk all day, or, taking the groceries from the car to the house. But give us those strength assessments. Describe them if you can, so that we can all try them. We'll all send you videos. How fun will that be?
There you go. Yeah, post them up in my Facebook group, which is called the Hebrew Hammers Hidden Hideaway. By the way, just look it up. I'll let you in.
Okay.
So what I would say is, rather than giving you a place to start, I'll give you an idea of where to go, because where you're going to start is going to depend largely on your past, your current training regimen, and things like that. And so it's hard to give like a blanket, like everyone should do this. If you do, it has to be pretty general. But what I would say is that the number one most important thing that people need to keep in mind, and this will feed into what I'll give you as strength assessment, if you will, is that your body is made to move, not to exercise. So that doesn't mean don't exercise, but exercise is a supplement for movement. Exercise is basically to movement what nutritional supplements are to eating. Meaning that if you take a lot of supplements but you're not eating right, like it doesn't really matter all that much. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the exercise it's not quite analogous, because exercising and then being largely sedentary, it will still help you. But if you move well and you move often, the exercise will be exponentially more beneficial to you. So the first thing that I want people to realize is the importance of movement before they jump into some very specific exercise regimen, because it will help you when you do jump into an exercise regimen. So think about the way that your body is made to move in space. If you want to break it down to the most absolutely basic components, you need to be able to move your body through free space, and you need to be able to move objects through free space. And that means, for example, not only standing in place and exercising, although that's important and it does have its place. It also means going from point A to point B. That's the essence of being a human, right? So what I would say, first and foremost, in terms of getting people to commandeer their body in free space, whether you're a man or a woman, you should be able to hang with your arms straight over your head, and your shoulders pulled down into their sockets, so away from your ears.
Okay, so don't let the arms get too close to the ears. You want to control it, so it will look like this. You want to make
and you can do it with a straight elbow, for example. So you don't have to be kind of like held like it. It's just basically like you're hanging onto the edge of a cliff, right? The shoulder, you can hang passively. It's called passive hanging, when the shoulders come up toward the ears. Nothing wrong with it. But at first, you want to make sure that you are maintaining a good amount of control. Mm-hmm. And so it'll probably be better for you to have your shoulders pulled into the sockets, so you can recruit a bit more muscle. Okay. And then as you get more strength in that position, then you can work on passive hanging, where you're going to be using more of the passive structures, like your tendons and ligaments, to hold you in place.
So we should be able to hang for how long?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. And then
1 minute.
What's the other one that you have?
So there are two other ones, I would say. One of them would be, you should be able to crawl with your knees off the ground.
Okay.
On or off, but ideally off the ground, for like a bare minimum of 2 minutes. And that could be forward, backward, side to side, with your head up to the best of your ability. You don't have to be trying to look at the ceiling, but just kind of keep your eyes forward so you can see where you're going.
Okay.
The last thing you want to do is put a hole in your drywall, and then you gotta replace that. And then you're like, oh, Alex doesn't know what he's talking about. And then the last thing would be to carry at least half of your body weight for 1 minute.
Okay.
So that might mean with, a pair of dumbbells, could be a couple of kettlebells. And that would be, let's say, like a quarter of your body weight in each hand.
Is
and
that
just
like walk
with it. Yeah, just walk with it for 1 minute. And all of these things don't really seem like exercises. In fact, if you go to the gym, maybe with the exception of the latter one, like the carrying,
Yeah.
if you go to the gym and you do that, most people are going to be like, what are you doing? But the reality is that these things are the way that the body is made, it more closely replicate the way that the body is made to move in nature, the way we've evolved to move. And it's going to do more for your exercise regimens later on down the line. So the ability to hang is going to work wonders for strengthening your grip. It's going to strengthen your shoulder girdle. It's going to decompress the spine. It is going to set you up for being able to do pull-ups. It's going to give you the back strength necessary to do rows and a variety of other things. And by extension, having all these things will make other things like push-ups significantly easier. Likewise with crawling, it's going to strengthen your shoulders. It's going to work wonders for your posture. It's going to help you to restore and rejuvenate.
I just sat up straight when you said that.
I saw that, yeah.
I was like, oh, posture. I felt the voice of my mother. Like, I'm sitting up straight.
Posture.
So
exactly.
Hang, crawl, carry. We can remember that.
That's
Hang, crawl, carry. This has been
HCC.
So good. I could talk to you forever about this stuff, but where can listeners find you if they want to learn more, interact more? How can they do that?
Well, I would say that without question, I am most active on my email. I send out a daily email that is jam-packed with actionable advice. My goal is always to educate, entertain, and inform people. And all my grade A content goes out on my email list. I am active on social media as well, but getting on my email list is going to be far and away where you're going to get the most focused information for what your goals are. And the best way to do that is I've got an 8-week kettlebell and bodyweight challenge that has just 2 very basic kettlebell movements and 2 very basic bodyweight movements, of which one of them is crawling. And it is 8 weeks cycling between these movements. I show you how to do it in a super simple program that will have you in, out, and strong in 20 minutes. It's called the 8-week kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. People from all over the world have done it and told me how much they loved it. There's a guy, in fact, if you go to the page where the download button is, there's a guy named Ryan who's father of at least one daughter. You might have more kids, but I know one for sure because it's in the picture. But he told me that he went from being able to do a one pull-up with an extra like 25 pounds hanging from him, which is respectable as it is. But at the end of 8 weeks, without doing weighted pull-ups, at the end of 8 weeks, he was able to do it with 53 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Hanging off.
That's amazing.
Double
so it does work.
In 8 weeks. And just in 20-minute workouts, which I think is pretty cool. Well, so the 8-week bodyweight challenge.
Prepare to have many people looking into that because I can't wait to share it, and I want to do it. So,
you should.
If you're listening to this and I didn't ask Aleks a question that you wanted asked, make sure you message me, and I will harass him and put out a bonus video via email. So thank you again, Aleks. That's a wrap. It was so good seeing you.
Pleasure was mine.
Woo! Great job.